Welcome to A Mick, a Mook, and a Mike, hosted by Billy O'Connor and Frank Pace, featuring Cowboy Joe West.
My brother.
My brother Frank, how are you, pal? Everything good?
Everything's really good.
Really good.
Thank you so much for asking.
Always. I'm
Billy.
very concerned about your health. How's your pants?
My pants are fine. They're on.
You got no socks on.
I
Lily's going to be upset.
I have no socks on.
Lily's going to be upset.
Lily
she looks
will
forward
be
to your
Lily
socks,
will be
pal.
upset. Lily will be upset. Well, today we're going to try something new. We're going to just talk, but we're adding a third component to our Mick, a Mook, and a Mike, and it's an umpire, Cowboy Joe West. So Joe's been doing random segments for us, but we'll do a whole show with Joe. So if Derek can bring him on. Hey,
There he is.
how you doing,
Yeah,
Joe?
I'm doing great. Derek found me.
Derek,
You're out of the game.
yeah, can you kick him out of the game?
Yeah, Derek found me, so I'm in trouble now. You know,
So
it kind of reminds me of the time that Elvis was doing that session in Nashville, and he's going to play that song called "The Guitar Man," and he couldn't get any musicians to play it like Jerry Reed had played it in the original. So Elvis looked at Colonel Parker and said, "Go find that guy that played this. We can't record this until it's done right." And so they went out and found Jerry Reed in a fishing boat. He was in a bass boat. He had rubber boots on and blue jeans and a dirty old T-shirt. And they brought him in the studio, and they set him down. And of course, he played it because he's the one that wrote it. And when he finished, he got up, and Elvis was tickled to death. And they're hugging each other. And as he's leaving the studio, Colonel Parker said, "Come here, you got to sign this." He said, "What for?" He said, "Because you're giving us all the publishing to this song." Jerry said, "No, I'm not." And he said, "Well, if you don't sign this, then we're not going to release it." He said, "I don't care. I own it, and you're not getting any of the money for it." And so that was the only song that Elvis recorded where he didn't get the publishing.
or you mean Colonel Tom didn't get the publishing?
Well, that's true, too.
Hey, so let's talk about the news. What's in the news? How much money do you think the UK spent? I'm asking you to both, Billy and what's your name, Joe, right? And Joe, on the Queen's funeral, billions. How much money do you think?
Oh, I don't know. Billions. You think so? Oh, security. I heard it was the biggest. Security was incredible, the amount of money they spent.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know that you could measure what they spent on it because from most everything that was done, it was already in the budget. I mean, the uniforms that they wore, I'm amazed that the Jaguar built them a car like that to haul the hearse. I mean, that's just unbelievable. And it was done with such class that and all the people they showed up just because of who she was. I mean, can you imagine running a country for that many years and still being beloved by all those people? You know, our guys can't run 4 years and anybody like them.
no,
Yeah, that's true.
it's incredible to me. And now they have to change all of their money to the new king has got to be on all of their money. That's going to be an expense as well.
Is Charlie,
Well-
Charlie's going to be on the money?
Charlie, your pal,
Oh,
Charlie.
yeah, my buddy Charlie. Yeah. Well, I'm Irish. I don't have any affinity towards the British, especially the monarchy.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. Do you know? I know Joe knows, but do you know Joe West worked with Queen Elizabeth in The Naked Gun?
And the Naked Gun, right? That's amazing.
What was that like, Joe?
Oh, that was like stealing.
It was like being a monarch.
It was unbelievable. I was there for 3 weeks. When they called me to shoot that movie, they said, "We'll give you $1,000 a week." I said, "I can't." I said, "Plus expenses." They said, No, this is budgeted for a day actor." I said, "I can't come to Los Angeles for $1,000 a week. I can't afford it." And they said, "Okay." So I hung up. About an hour later, they called back and said, "We'll give you $3,000 a week." So I'm thinking, okay, you know, I'd probably stay with one of my buddies, and we'll end up at the Prince of Wales every night. And okay, for $3,000. Well, I didn't know that they pay you in residuals on your salary. So I tripled my money by holding out. and then when I get to the set, it was at Dodger Stadium. They rearranged Dodger Stadium to try to look like Anaheim. And when I get to the set, the first thing they're rehearsing is Leslie Nielsen singing the national anthem. And all I could think of was, what did I get into? This is going to be crazy. And you remember how bad he sang it. It was hilarious. But you talk about a fun group of people to work with. They were all good to work with. And there was a couple of minor league kids that I had in the minor leagues. And when they had that big fight on the field, the first time we rehearsed it, 3 of them got me on the ground and they're hitting me like, this is for Rocky Mountain. This is for Kingston.
Well,
my uniform's dirty. They had to dry clean my uniform to do the next thing. So,
you mentioned Los Angeles. What are your favorite watering spots and restaurants around the country? Because you're a bon vivant of sorts. You've traveled the country doing baseball games for whoever knows how many years. What are some of your favorite spots?
well, in Los Angeles, we used to end up at this place called the Prince of Wales, which is out in Playa del Rey, close to the beach. And it was mainly because they had the hottest chicken wings and the coldest beer. And that's where we used to hang out, and especially if you had an all-nighter traveling back to the East Coast. It was on the way to the airport, so that's where we hung out. And I actually used to stay at Marina del Rey because I liked the area out there, and the restaurants during the day were really nice. But yeah, the Prince of Wales, and it was really funny because early in my career, there was smoking in the restaurants and bars. And then California was one of the first states to have no smoking in indoor restaurants. So the Prince of Wales opened up the roof for their smoking section. So in the middle of the bar, they would open the roof so you could smoke in the middle of the bar.
Wow.
But and there was another club out there called Stats, and that was in Culver City. And Stats, I don't think it's there anymore, but Stats had a satellite on their roof before the TV stations did. And when they started showing these pay-per-view things on the air,
right,
Stats could get them because they already had the satellite. And so these people started suing Stats for pirating the signal. And they took them to court, and Stats won because they had the satellite before there was a law for it. So they were grandfathered in. They could get all the boxing pay-per-view for free. But and it was an interesting little pub. And then there was a couple of other little places. The Marina del Rey is sprinkled with a lot of nice little bars and restaurants.
Well,
but
what are your favorite cities? How about New York? Is New York one of them, or is New York down on the list?
oh no, I enjoyed New York. You and I've been to my favorite little place there called Smith and Walensky, into the grill back there. In fact, we had dinner there a couple of times, haven't we?
We had Joe Regalbuto.
That's
dinner.
right.
He still talks about that dinner.
Well, that's because he didn't pay.
Yeah. Wait. He never pays.
He's on scholarship.
He's always been on
He's a
scholarship.
bit frugal, huh,
He's
Joe?
a bit frugal.
Yeah, S&W is a buddy of mine, runs that joint, Timmy Butler. I used to temp bar with him back when I was 20 years old. And,
Yeah.
he's the manager of that joint, S&W. Great
They
steak,
had
great steak.
They had a bartender there named Patty Ford. He's still there. And Patty was friends with Senator Kennedy. And Senator Kennedy's staff had been on his case for drinking too much alcohol in public. So he came in the grill back there at Smith and Walensky, and he comes in the back door. Of course, when he did, half the restaurant stood up to greet him. Oh, Senator, so nice to see you, and all this stuff. And sure enough, he finds his way to the bar, and Patty Ford leans over and says, Senator, nice to see you. What can I get you? He said, I'll have a Diet Pepsi. And Patty Ford said, not in here you won't. It's a Coke establishment. What the hell's wrong with you? He said, okay, I'll have a Chevys on the rocks.
Perfect.
I'll tell you a quick Kennedy story. We were in New York. I think it was for the '92 convention, and I was with Bill Bradley, and he said, "Come up to the hotel afterwards. We're gonna have some people in a room, and Ted Kennedy will stop by." So Karen and I went up to the room, and there was, everybody was there. Phil Jackson was there, all of his people, and at like 9 o'clock, the door opens and Ted Kennedy walks in. At 9:01, he left. He came in, made a loop, made sure everybody saw him, and left so he could fulfill his obligation to Bill Bradley to show up.
Wow.
That's the way politics works, I guess. He was there.
Like a tea bag, just
Yeah.
in and out, huh? We used to say in the firehouse, "You're busy last night, in and out like a honeymoon dick. Just in and out, in and out, in and out."
Other restaurants, other cities.
Oh, well, in Cincinnati, there was this place called Walt's Hitching Post. Now, Cincinnati is really known for Montgomery Inn, ribs and pork and stuff, but the Walt's Hitching Post across the river in Kentucky was where the umpires used to hang out. And there's a great story about it because they cooked their ribs in an outdoor grill, and then they'd bring them in, and the meat would fall off the bones. It was that good. It's just unbelievable. So there was this crew of umpires were in there. John Kibler, Dick Stello, Bruce Fleming, and this young umpire named Greg Bonet. And Billy Melton owned the place at the time, and he's walking around the restaurant with his coat and tie on. He looked real dapper, and he went by the bar, and he says, "Those are the umpires over there at work the Reds game today." And this guy at the bar had a little too much to drink, and he said, "That guy can't be an umpire, he's too fat." And he was talking about Bruce Fleming. So Bruce got up, put his beer down, walked over and says, "Big shot like you, I'll race you across the parking lot for $200. So the guy had just enough booze that he got up and he raced Bruce across the park, and Bruce beat him. And so the rumor of Bruce running somebody across the parking lot for $200, that spread like wildfire. When they got to the ballpark the next day, the media was there. And they said, somebody knocked on the door, and of course, 3-4 reporters came in. And they said, "Is it true that Fleming outran a guy across the parking lot at Billy Melton's last night?" And Dick Stello said, "True. It was after 2 slabs of ribs and a case of beer, and he still beat him." But that was a little hangout we'd go to get something to eat before we went to Bobby Mackey's to sing at the nightclub in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky. So that was a cute little place. There's a lot of places across the countries, San Francisco, noted for great restaurants. There was a place called Julius Castle. When you come into town, you can see it up on the hill, and I'm not even sure they're open anymore. But that used to be a great place to have dinner. Atlanta had this Russian restaurant called Nikolai's. It was like a 1 or 2 month waiting period to get in it. Houston, I think my favorite place there was a little place called Pappadeaux's. And the Pappas family, Pappas, was out of Dallas. And they had started building these restaurants. It was the Pappas Steakhouse, and then they decided Pappadeaux's was going to be a Cajun restaurant, and then Pappasito's was going to be the Mexican restaurant. But Pappadeaux's had crawfish and all this stuff. And there's another restaurant there called Willie G's. And Willie G's was a upscale crawfish, oyster, seafood kind of place. And when Dave Casper, the tight end for the Raiders, got traded to the Houston Oilers, he found out about this place, and he used to go there for lunch. And so he goes in this place, and the owner recognizes him, so he puts him in one of the banquet rooms in the back. And so he goes in there and he sits down, and there's two guys in there dressed like hippies, long scraggly beard, long hair and everything. And of course they introduce themselves. I'm Dusty and I'm Billy, and Dave says, I'm Dave. And so the next 3-4 times he goes in there, those two guys are there every time he go in there. So now he goes to this charity function. And when he shows up, there's those two hippies that he's been having lunch with. Of course, he doesn't know their last name, and they don't know his last name. And they said, hey, Dave, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm supposed to be one of the celebrities here. And they said, celebrities, what do you do? He said, well, I play football for the Oilers. And they said, really? What's your last name? He said, Casper. They said, you're Dave Casper? Oh, my God. We didn't know. I mean, he says, what are you guys doing here? They said, well, we're ZZ Top.
That's pretty funny.
Tough to mistake those two guys. They look like a shop floor on a Saturday night. They're just all hair.
Yeah. Hey, Joe, listen, can I get your take on the LIV Live Tour versus the PGA Tour? What the hell's going on with that?
Well, I think the people on the Live Tour are not telling you it's about the money. Because that's what it's about. I mean, this is no more than a money grab. And do you blame the guys for taking it? I can't blame them. What I do look at is, and it's kind of funny because McElroy spoke about it. He said, if you had the Live Tour play the PGA Tour, says, how do you think you guys are doing? He said, well, we'd certainly win because we're used to playing 72 holes instead of 54. So, but they are paying people to play on that tour for their past performance, and they're paying people to try to get the marquee billing. The PGA Tour has already paid their dues, and they have it set up where they have a little bit of a monopoly on what goes on, but golf's a unique sport in the PGA Tour because you don't get paid if you don't win. You know, it's not like baseball. If you finish last, you're still going to get your salary. But if you don't make the cut, you don't get anything on the PGA Tour. On the Live Tour, they get paid whether they make the cut or not. You know, Phil Mickelson didn't shoot a score on the par the first 3 or 4 tournaments, and yet he's still got all the upfront money. But you have to realize years ago, the PGA Tour had to make rules against their guys getting appearance money, because otherwise the guys like Tiger Woods and the Jack Nicklauses and the Arnold Palmers, they'd be getting all the appearance money whether they won or not. So they had to do away with those kind of things. And a lot of people don't realize that happened a long time ago, before it got to where it's competing corporations fighting over whose tour you're going to be on. But I'm afraid that they've created a lot of bad blood on both sides because of the way they've done it. I know that the players have always resented Norman doing anything, and Norman's the head of the Live Tour, and he's not one of those guys that you would say that's well liked. Had Jack Nicklaus or Tiger Woods or Arnold Palmer done something like this, it might have been a little smoother in the way it was done. But there's a lot of people that don't like Greg Norman because of how he's treated certain people.
But I think there's a lot of people that don't like Patrick Reed, and a lot of people that don't like Bryson DeChambeau. I feel like the Live Tour went after, primarily malcontents. Do you see it that way?
Well, how do you say Bruce Koepka? I mean, I know how they got him. They got him through his little brother. But you can't call him a malcontent. He's one of the marquee players in the world.
And so's Cameron Smith.
Right. But you're right. It's sometimes you look at when you look back on it, would you pick Barry Bonds if you could? In the middle of his career, would you say, yeah, I'll take him even though he's got a lot of baggage? I mean, would the New York Jets have said, I don't want Joe Namath because of his reputation?
Yeah.
Well, so you look at those kind of things too, and that's another thing. You have to determine, whether you like the guy or not. Is he going to do the job for you? And that's the point. There'll be issues. I mean, Thurman Munson and Reggie Jackson didn't get along, but yet when they were fighting for the same thing, they would win the World Series. Yeah. And but Thurman and Reggie didn't get along, and part of it was maybe it was some petty jealousy, maybe it was the way somebody said something, but whether you like the guy or not, they did their jobs. So I'm a little concerned that golf's got a little bit of a black eye by the way they've handled it, because I've always said this: golf and tennis were gentlemen's sports, and then they let the Americans in it.
Hey, JJ, let me ask you a question. Billy's thinking about retiring and going to live on a yacht. Do you think that's a sailboat? What do you think of that idea?
Well, it depends on how much you like the water. Have you got somebody to clean the bottom of your boat?
No, but you got to take care of that. That's another thing. Huh?
That's one of your big expenses. I've for tax purposes, it might be a good thing.
Tax purposes.
How do you tax nothing?
Because you can register the boat in, say, the Cayman Islands or somewhere, and you can, even if you claim Florida as a residence for the boat, you don't have to pay the taxes for the property tax that you would have to pay on a house. So if you're looking at it for that reason, that's not a bad idea. If you're looking at it to have fun, because sailing can be a nice experience. Of course, you're not going to go very fast, but it's one of those things where if you lived on a boat and you were close to marinas and cities that cater to boaters, it might be a good thing. But
what's your plan, Billy? Let me hear your plan.
Well, sailing for me is not about hiding money. That's for shit show. I mean, I don't have to hide my money. The IRS, I can't find my money myself. Never mind the IRS. They ain't gonna find it. I'm just looking to, get out in the water. Nice. Actually, my plan is in the winter.
Yeah.
It gets cold. Although I'm only an hour and a half from Pasadena, I'm up in the mountains. So It's like sometimes it's 24 inches of snow. I hate snow. I'm in California, but I hate snow. So I get a sailboat. I put it in the marina. It's $400 a month for the marina. And I sail in the winter and, camp out on the boat. That's all. I ain't a yacht. It's going to be like a 30-footer or something, I'm a man of modest means. I'm a blue-collar guy, Frank. I always tell you, Joe, well, my father was such a blue-collar guy that when he used to read his fairy tales, he never said once upon a time. He always said once upon a time and a half. He was a union guy.
Hey, that reminds me, what do you think of minor league baseball guys getting a union?
I think it's long overdue.
Yeah. Because
they have taken advantage of them and for years, and the way they've treated them, and it's not right. I had a big fight with our union before I left over the logo that they have to wear on their shirts. FTX was a major league sponsor, and baseball said, we're going to let you wear these on your shirt, and we're going to give every umpire $1,000 in cryptocurrency. And I said, well, what about the minor league umpires that come up here to work? Oh, we're not going to give them anything. I said, well, they're going to wear the logo. How do you pay us and don't pay them? And baseball said, well, the deal's already done. We're not changing it. And so I went to the union, and the union turned me down. And so I went to the charity that was going to have a windfall of some $100,000 for cryptocurrency for us wearing that patch. And they weren't going to give $1,000 to 19 call-up umpires. Wow. And so I got upset about it. And I told him, I said, well, then I'm not going to contribute to your charities anymore if you can't give those 19 kids the $1,000 that we're getting. I said, I don't even care if you take it out of our money, but they need to be compensated just like we were. And
good for you, man. Good for you.
But I didn't win that battle, so.
Yeah. And are the minor league umpires unionized?
Yes, but there again, years ago, we tried to get them to be part of our union, and they turned us down. And here's a funny thing. Years ago, I had both the minor league union and the major league umpires union in the Teamsters, and they turned that down too. And well, I know why, because we have a lot of people saying, well, you know, the Teamsters have a criminal element. And I said, and baseball doesn't.
Yeah, I hear that argument all the time against unions, you know, the criminal element. What about everything? Every organization, Catholic Church, I mean, what? Politics, everything.
Well, here's the big thing. If the umpires had decided to join the Teamsters, which the Major League Baseball Players Association is talking about joining the AFL-CIO, but if the Major League umpires had joined the Teamsters, we would have been their marquee ad. Their marquee ad now is truck drivers and airline pilots. We would have been 76 Teamsters that had the full labor support of over 700,000 members. And that would have been a good thing for them in negotiating, because then you'd be playing on more of a level playing field when you went to negotiate. I mean, if you were in the Teamsters and you were locked out or you had to set up a picket line, there wouldn't be any beer delivered to St. Louis. And Budweiser's are right down the street, because all those trucks come in with Teamster drivers. They wouldn't deliver. So you would have a better chance of negotiating if you have a level playing field. And the umpires have done okay, but we could have done better had we had strong labor support. In fact, in the early years, in the 79 and 80, when we were locked out, we had the Teamsters walk the picket lines with us. And the Pittsburgh stadiums were empty when they walked a picket line in front of them.
Oh, yeah.
Billy, when you were a fireman, did you ever go out on strike?
No, well, we have a deal with the city. You couldn't, if you're a fireman, you really can't go on strike because of there's no fireman in the world that's going to go past a burning building and say, I'm not going in, I'm on strike. It's not going to happen. You know, so we have a deal with the city that we don't do that. But for the Teamsters, I worked for the Teamsters. I was local 814 when I first came back from Nam. I was delivering appliances and stuff. You did that for a bit too, right?
Yeah.
Delivering stuff. And Joe's right about one thing. You don't cross a Teamsters picket line. Not in them days anyway. Not back in 1970, 71, you weren't crossing the Teamster picket line. That's for sure.
No.
Are there more? Go ahead. I'm sorry, Joe.
No, I was just going to say they were a big supporter of the umpires union in the late 70s when I was first coming to the big leagues, and we actually didn't go into Pittsburgh twice when they had a ticket taker strike and a groundskeeper strike. And the National League office called us and said, we'll fire you if you don't go in. And we said, we're not going in. You'll just have to fire us. And those strikes were over in 24 hours because we weren't going to cross a picket line because they had honored our picket line. And it's really funny. Whenever I worked third base in Pittsburgh in my later years, there was an usher over there, and he's in his 90s. And he would come down and say hi to me. So I'd go over and in the first or second inning and shake his hand. And one day I heard this lady say, he's the only umpire that you call over during the game. Well, why is that? And he said, because he honored our picket line back in 1979.
That's great. Wow. That's absolutely great.
Do you think that the minor league players association will be run under Tony Clark, or will it be a totally separate union from the Major League Baseball?
Well, I think if they structure it right, Tony Clark can run both of them. And because you see, here was the thing that I was trying to sell to the umpires with the Teamsters. Airline pilots are paid on a scale. Like the guy that flies a 747 gets paid one scale. The guy that flies a 737 is paid another scale. The guy that flies the prop planes is paid another. So you're paid on a scale of where you are in the industry. And that would have been the same thing if the minor league players joined the big league players union. And I think they become much stronger if they're together than they are if they're separate. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
In other words, if
Strength in numbers.
Strength in numbers, always.
Well, that's true too. But here was something that I ran into that people couldn't understand. They said if we join the Teamsters and the people at the beer distributorship, they go on strike, we can't work. And that's not true, because you're not working at the beer distributorship. You're working at the ballpark. The difference is if you go on strike and you're working at the ballpark, they can't deliver across your picket line. We would have no effect on their strike at the beer distributorship. And like the airlines, many times we've refused to take flights on an airline that was on strike because we wouldn't cross their picket line. And no one knows about that, because where would it be publicized? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
In other words, you would not be shut down if somebody at this trucking company is on strike, because you wouldn't be doing anything where they are picketing. So I couldn't explain that to the umpires well enough to where they could grasp the concept of being in the Teamsters. So they never agreed with what I was trying to propose to them.
I think you were dead right. Like Frank said, the strength in numbers. I mean, it just makes sense. I'm a big union guy. So to me, the only way to prevent organized greed is organized labor. To me, that's it. Unions did so much for me and for my father and his father before him, So I'm a big union guy. It's just, you have to have strength in numbers,
Well, now you're going to run into a couple of other things. Like, I can remember it was a few years back when the teachers were on strike in Wisconsin, or they were going to strike in Wisconsin, and they were striking over benefits. And the governor said, if I give you what you're asking for these benefits, I'm going to have to fire 20 or 30 of you.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was 20% of you, because of the numbers that he was going to have to come up with. I don't have the money to pay you that kind of money. So the teachers union made a fatal mistake. They said, open your books and show us. And he did. And if you open your books and show them under labor law, then they don't have to abide by it. They don't even have to negotiate past what they can afford. And so we would go to baseball many times and say, we'd like this amount of money, and they'd say, well, we're not going to pay that. And if they'd said, we can't afford to pay you that, they would have had to open their books. They never said that. So we never got to a point where we could look at what their books really were. And baseball's been smart about that. And for years, they were a nonprofit. I think it was just in the past couple of years that they registered as a profit organization to make money. All the money that came in had to go out. So there's labor laws that protect the worker, and then there are labor laws that protect the ownership. But it's all put in there to be fair to everybody. But I applaud the governor of Wisconsin for opening his book, saying, I can't afford it. If I pay this, I've got to fire 20% of you. And he was right.
Well, 1970, when I first came back from Nam, somebody told me, why don't you take the fireman's test? And I was working for the Teamsters. Why don't you take the cops test? I think cops were making $6 an hour then, $7 an hour. Firemen were making, and I was making like $9 an hour as a Teamster. I said, I'm not going to make $7 an hour. I got to be out of my mind, But what happened to us was, and I'm talking John Lindsay year, when John Lindsay was mayor of New York, DeLury, who was the head of the sanitation department, pulled out all the garbage men. And the height of the summer was August, and it was a heat wave in New York.
And it stunk.
I mean, it stunk. And he pulled them out right in the middle of the summer during the heat wave, and the garbage just kept building up outside all the big restaurants in Manhattan, and the rats and everything else, and the smell. And finally, I mean, the pressure was on that he had to settle. So Lindsay gave the sanitation department a contract where they were making like $15 an hour, right? They almost doubled it. And the cops and firemen ended up piggybacking on that. Like, how do you pay a garbage man 15? You're giving us 6, So that's when the door opened up for us anyway.
Right.
I got a question about this.
Yeah.
So when you're in a union, I don't know anything about this, although I'm an old man, but a young man. Can people in a union, can you as an individual negotiate your salary? First of all,
No.
not at all. So everybody
No,
has
I
to
know of it.
make the same. Okay, and then
Well, if you-
does that apply? Go ahead.
If you have a collective bargaining agreement,
Okay.
it's stipulated as to who gets to negotiate for what. In other words, the players have their own union,
Right.
and they have to be paid a minimum of this, minimum of that. They have to have insurance for this, insurance for that. Anyway, but their salary is left open for negotiation. So yes, in their case, they can negotiate for themselves.
What about
the umpires?
That's what I was going to ask.
When I first came to the major leagues, you had individual contracts. We had a union, but we had individual contracts. So you could negotiate your own salary with baseball.
Right.
Now, when Richie Phillips came in and took over, he made the collective bargaining agreement so that everybody was paid on the scale of your seniority.
Oh, okay.
Well, to the guys that were already getting big raises, either because the office thought they were good umpires or because they were kissing the office's ass, they got more raises before Richie Phillips got there than they got when it was put on a scale.
Mm.
Well, those umpires were upset that all the other umpires in their seniority bracket caught up with them. And that's understandable, but they made it fair for all the umpires so that you were paid on a scale of your seniority.
Got it.
So, but yes, it does change according to the collective bargaining agreement that you put in place with the employer.
What are the average amount of seasons, Joe, if this is an appropriate question, that an umpire usually works? Is he good for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? I mean, what's the average? Notwithstanding yourself.
Your pension maxes out at 20 years.
20 years. Pension maxes out.
How about what percentage of umpires reach the 20-year pension mark? Max out at 20 years.
Probably 90% of them.
Wow. So it's like the Supreme Court. It's a job for life.
Well, I wouldn't say that, because when they physically can't do it anymore, that you have to step down. I mean, and some of these Supreme Court people.
Hey, the union just sent this guy over. He's 102. Can we find a spot for him?
It's pretty funny.
I remember Strom Thurmond, right? When the Strom Thurmond was 103 or some shit, and he was still in the Senate. I mean, could you imagine him showing up at your doorstep? Joe, can you put this guy to work out there in the field? Strom Thurmond, he's 102.
Yeah.
What other job can you do?
That's you, Billy.
Billy, again. How many times do you have to turn it off?
It's spam. They're trying to sell me Viagra.
He's got to take his medication.
I keep telling him dead birds don't fall out of nests. Why are they trying to sell me Viagra?
Oh, Christ.
So by that notion, I mean, if you're going to be an umpire, you're figuring for the 20-year game. That's for sure. I mean, you're looking for a 20-year retirement, and anything above and beyond that is gravy.
Well, you have to understand this too. They grade each umpire on their performance, and if an umpire's not umpiring up to that standard performance, they have avenues that they can take to get rid of that umpire.
Wow.
And what percentage of umpires are actually gotten rid of, though? Very, very low percentage, I would imagine, because if by the time
why would you hire somebody to this job that you think you're going to have to fire?
That's what I mean.
Yeah, you should never hire somebody that 2-3 years down the road you think you're going to have to fire. Now, we've had some young umpires that come into the league and they need, some seasoning, a little polish here, a little polish there, but for the most part, they've been supervised right up to the day that they hire them into what baseball wants them to do. I mean, we've had situations where the office didn't like somebody. We had one situation where they called me and said, "We don't like this umpire because nobody believes him." I said, well, they don't believe me either, but they're stuck with it. But the point is that you have to grade these people in accordance with what they're doing on the field. Every umpire is graded on his plate work. And before I left, we didn't have a single umpire that graded under 95%.
Whoa.
Wow.
On his plate,
That's great.
we have umpires that they spent $45 million developing the replay system to prove that we're 99% right on the basis. Now, with $45 million, they could have improved the umpire development system so that we wouldn't be losing quality people because they can't afford to work for them in the minor leagues. But they spent the $45 million on the replay system to prove that we're 99% right.
And
Now, I don't tell ownership how to spend their money, but I think you could have spent it in a little different way.
Yeah, and salaries.
When an umpire comes up and he works the majors, Joe, do they start him in the field at first, second, and third base, and then go behind the plate? Because
no, they rotate.
They just rotate no matter what. It's random.
Well, if he's the rookie on the crew, he would probably start at third base. And the next game he would be at second. The next game he would be at first. And his fourth game he would be behind the plate.
And then a rotation continues throughout the year.
Yeah, we go clockwise. The players run backwards.
Egypt.
You got another question, Derek?
Yeah, sure.
Well, let's go. Let's hear it.
You go fishing?
Your question is, do you go fishing?
Do you go fishing, Joe West?
Yeah, I've been fishing a couple times this year already. We caught a fish the other day called a permit fish. It's a big white fish, and you can only catch one per person in the boat. And it was some of the best fish I ever had. I'd never seen one before I caught it.
Huh.
So it was a nice little trip out just off the coast of Bradenton. And the last time I went out fishing, I went with this professional golfer named Larry Ziegler. He's in his 80s now, but it was really funny. He spent $500 for this fishing trip, and we caught enough fish to feed an army. And when we got back, I called this friend I know who owns a couple restaurants named Dewey Tomko. Dewey is a professional gambler, and he's been at the World Series of Poker table 35 times. I don't think he's won, but he's finished in the top 5 4 times. Anyway, he has 2 restaurants in Orlando. So we came back, we got all this fish, we got a couple families together, and we go over to this restaurant called Vines. They cook the fish for us for free. But the wine bill was more than the fishing trip. But it was really good. Dewey is he's a golf hustler too. Dewey's a funny kind of guy. He was on, like I said, he was on the World Series of Poker. But they asked Justin Leonard one time. He said, "If you had a guy to make a putt for $1 million, who would you want to take it?" And of course, they thinking he's going to say Jack Nicklaus or Tiger Woods or whoever. He said Dewey Tomko. And of course, the guy from the Golf Channel said, "Who's Dewey Tomko?" He said, "Well, he's the only guy I know had to make a putt for $1 million, and he made it."
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
That's some story.
Have you ever participated in a fishing tournament? I'm curious about fishing tournaments.
No, and being from North Carolina, that's a good question. Is why I never had one, because they have all these fishing tournaments off the Outer Banks all the time, and I just never got in one of those big Hatteras yachts and went. But who used to go a lot was Ted Williams.
Oh.
He loved those fishing tournaments, and it was really funny because usually he'd go down and find out which boat had the most fun, and he'd get on that boat. And it didn't matter who he was supposed to be; he would go where he wanted to.
Ted Williams was famous for bone fishing in the flats, right? In Florida.
Yes, he was.
Bone
Yeah.
fishing. Yeah, that was
Look at
his
that,
thing.
Billy. Look at the inside information.
I tell you, when we're talking about gamblers and poker, one of the best metaphors I ever heard. When you play poker, there's always you count the suckers, at the table. The old adage is if you don't know what a sucker is at the table, it's you, right? But one of the best lines I ever heard is when the suckers win, and occasionally you got to grease the pants so the cookies don't stick. The sucker's got to win once in a while, And they say, "What happened? What happened at the game last night?" The lettuce ate the rabbits.
The lettuce ate the rabbits.
Well, you got to remember this: you can't kill your pigeons; you just wound them a little bit.
Exactly. Exactly.
You guys are hilarious.
That's terrific.
Hey, Billy, when you were in the bar business, what are some of the tricks you did to encourage people to drink?
Oh yeah. Well, when I was in the bar business in the '70s till about '85, the first time around, and at the time we had a lot of, it was a regular saloon. I had rock and roll bands and stuff like that, but all these kids, the big phrase that was Perrier water. Perrier was the thing. Perrier. I'll have a Perrier. I'll have a bottle of Perrier. Do you have Perrier? And we didn't have Perrier. It was a saloon. I said, yeah, I got Perrier. Perrier on tap. I got it on tap. Yes, you got it on tap. Yeah, right from Paris. Here you go, $5. It was $1 for the club soda, but it's $5 for the Perrier. Put a twist of lime in it. You got it. He's got Perrier on tap. Yeah, right from Paris. or you get these kids. They come in. They have no idea. They say, "Let me have a vodka and orange juice and a screwdriver." I said, "You want a vodka and orange juice and a screwdriver?" I make the drinks. I put two stirrers in one. I say, "This is the vodka and orange juice. Don't screw it up with the screwdriver.
And
Don't get it confused.
charge them double.
Charge them double." Yeah. Saloon businesses. That's why I asked you about Gillies, because I was so, the size of that place. I heard it was enormous. But how many acres? You said 3.5 acres?
Yeah, 3.5 acres under one roof. And it was crazy because Gillies was a tour stop for most of the bands going West Coast to East Coast or East Coast to West Coast. And they used it as a stop along the way because they would make their tours. And of course, if you were doing the Houston Rodeo, which was the last big country show of the year, everybody wanted to do Gillies the day before or the day after because that was the biggest show of all. That's probably where George Strait became famous because of the Houston Rodeo. But who I met there one time was Charlie Pride, and he was up in the second deck watching the act that was performing before him. And I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I don't want to say anything that he says in his show." I said, "Like, what could he say in his show that you would say?" He says, "Are you having a good time?" He said, "If he says that in his show, I'm not going to say that in my show. If he sings one of my songs, I'm not going to sing it in my show." And it struck a nerve with me, like, he's actually watching this as if he's in the audience with everybody else. So he's not going to do the same thing that artist did in front of him. It was amazing just to see his preparation before he went out there. And it wasn't that he was checking on which song he was going to do. It was what the artist did in front of him so that he didn't copy it or do something that was where you would say, "Oh, he did that from the first show."
Yeah, consummate professional.
Oh yeah, he was a classic. And you talk about a guy that loved baseball. I always wanted to face Nolan Ryan, and I'd say, "I always want to be there when you do it."
Oh, that's really funny.
There's a show now facing Nolan, isn't it?
Yeah.
I haven't seen it. I heard it's terrific.
I haven't seen it either. Hey, Joe.
I was in Dallas one day walking to the locker room, and I'm working the Texas Rangers. And there's this group of people walking toward me in the tunnel, and I recognized Jim Sundberg, who used to catch in the big leagues. And he's working for the Texas Rangers at the time as a consultant, as a tour guide, and all these people are walking. And I think there was about 20 people with him, and I'll give him credit. When he walked up to me, he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce you to Joe West. He's a senior umpire, Major League Baseball." And I'll give him credit. He introduced me to every person in the group by name. Now, my mother was one of 13 And I couldn't go to a family reunion without standing next to her because I couldn't remember all of her relatives' names. But he introduced everybody in that group to me by name. And the last person he introduced me to was his wife. And so being the smart ass that I am, I said, well, I bet you probably yelled at me before. And she said, no, I never yelled at you. But Ruth Ryan sure did.
Joe, do you miss it?
No, I don't miss the travel. You know what I do miss is the people. And not only the umpires, but the game itself. I do miss that. But do I miss the travel and how hard it was? You know, I'm getting to be an old man and I just can't do all that anymore. But, you know, I was in St. Louis for the opening day this year, and Rita wanted to go to the game. So I took her down there, and when I got in the corner, I let her out and I went back to the condo.
Wow.
Has it changed for umpires? Is the game different? I mean, not the game itself, but the occupation. I mean, has it changed a lot being an umpire, young umpire now that when you came into the game, like every other profession seems to have changed, you know?
Well, I don't know that the game has changed that much. I think that the player today is bigger, stronger, faster than he ever was, and they pay him enough money where they can be a year-round athlete. Where when I started, they had to go get a job to make ends meet because they weren't paying everybody enough money to make a living. But and you got to realize that when I started, the first year umpire made $16,500, which I thought was a lot of money at the time. But you look back on it, and that was really nothing in accordance to what they're making. But a lot of that's attributed to who developed baseball into the marketing deal that it is. You know, I don't think anybody did more for baseball than Peter Uberoth. I think he taught them how to make money. He taught them how to keep the money. He taught them how to license the money. He taught them a whole lot of things. I mean, the first thing he did was he settled an umpire strike in 1984. And then the second thing he did was they came in and they said Gillette was the all-star ballot sponsor. And they told him, they said, we really appreciated being your sponsor for the all-star ballot. And Uberoth said, well, yeah, and if you want to do it again next year, it'll be $1 million. Well, they said, excuse me? He said, no, if you want to be the sponsor, you're going to pay us $1 million. Well, they immediately backed out, and USA Today took it. And then he went to IBM, and he got the tail of the tape for home runs. And he went to Rawlings, and he said, do you like being the official baseball for Major League Baseball? And they said, yes. And he said, good, then you can furnish everybody their uniforms. So he taught them how to make money on what they have. And he did so much for baseball that people don't realize. And he was only there for like 4 years. And I applaud for what he did to help everybody, you know, and what they were doing. And I can remember the first time he called an owners meeting. Not one owner showed up. So he canceled the meeting. He said, when I call an owners meeting, don't send your GM.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
Hey, one thing in closing.
No, go ahead.
I noticed after, let's say, pitcher strikes out a guy to end the inning, the catcher doesn't roll the ball back to the pitcher anymore because that ball would have to be taken out of play because it hit the grass.
I think they're taking it over to the dugout to give it to a kid or something. I don't know.
Yeah, no more rolling the ball back to the pitcher. Those days are gone.
Yeah. Well, you got to remember, back years ago, they used to leave their gloves on the field too, and they don't do that anymore either.
For sure.
But Frank, you and I are the only ones that would remember that.
Yeah. Well, I was behind the plate and I rolled a bunch of balls out, but I was playing rec leagues where we only used one ball, so hope we didn't lose the ball. That's for sure. Derek,
well, you know, if you give a pitcher a ball that's scuffed, and let's say they throw it as hard as Nolan Ryan, some of these guys today throw it harder than Nolan Ryan. If they put the ball the scuff on the left side of the ball and turn it loose, the ball's going to run that way. If you put it on the other side, the ball's going to run the other way. So to give a guy that has that much spin on the ball or that much strength to throw it fast is dangerous because they can really make it work. I mean, everybody said something about Whitey Ford would scuff the ball and Don Sutton would scuff the ball. Well, those guys didn't scuff the ball. The catchers did it.
Yeah,
they rub it on the shin guard and they throw it back to
that's what I was going to say. Is maybe apocryphal, but the rumor was that Howard scuffed a few baseballs on his shin guards for Whitey Ford.
Yep. Yeah, I got a couple questions. This is turning into the Joe West interview.
Cool.
So, I guess the first question is: has your schedule changed since you have retired? So, you get up at what time in the morning? Do you have a different type of breakfast? Do you have breakfast? Do you go on long walks and hold hands with your loved ones? Like, is there a different Joe West now versus before?
Yeah, I'm playing a lot worse golf than I ever did. And it's really bad. The other day, my wife Rita and her girlfriend and her husband, we all went out to play. And her husband shot 37, 38 and didn't win a hole. Now, we're playing the women. You got to realize this. The two guys are playing the two wives. And my partner's 3 over par for the whole day. He doesn't win a hole. I won 1. They beat us to death. So when we went in for a cocktail, they were ordering martinis and Rita ordered her Michelob Ultra. And I'm trying to get over us getting the hell beat out of us. I looked at Glenda and I said, we want a rematch. And her husband said, absolutely not. We're not playing them again. I said, oh, yes, we are. And of course, his wife said, anytime, anywhere. I said, okay, we're going to play at Gator Creek. And she got all excited. She said, absolutely, we're ready for Gator Creek. And my wife, Rita, said, we're not playing at Gator Creek. And she said, why is that? And Rita said, because it's an all-men's club. We can't get on the golf course.
Well, your wife is also a member of the St. Louis Hall of Fame, Sports Hall of Fame, or Missouri Hall of Fame. Or the Midwest Hall of Fame. She's so big and she was so great and such a terrific athlete that it's a wonder that you could come within a couple of strokes of her. I know you're right. You're the favorite son of Elon, North Carolina, held a quarterback record for all those years, but I'm going to bet you can't beat Rita.
Well, she's quite the athlete. She was a professional racquetball player, and she's in the St. Louis Hall of Fame, the Missouri Sports Hall of Fame. In fact, she's going back there in about 2 weeks for a special event. They're retiring one of the directors, and they're going to put him in the Hall of Fame. So she's going back to that. She's all excited about that. We just played in the regular Missouri Sports Hall of Fame golf tournament, and at the auction the night before, they decided to bring out this thing where they're going to play bingo for one coverall. And of course, guess who wins the coverall?
Of course.
I won the coverall, right? So while they're checking my card, Jamie Quirk, who played in the big leagues,
Kansas City,
got up in the back of the room and he put his hands over his ears and he says, they're going to replay to be sure they're right.
That's fantastic.
That's great. Joe, great. It's been fun
Great,
having
Joe.
you. It was fun cutting us up with the 4 of us.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
And you'll be back for sure with our regular scheduled features, little 10-minute vignettes, but we wanted to get you on it for an entire episode again.
Well, it's a lot of fun.
So much fun doing this.
It's always good to see you, and I hope to see you at Pebble Beach in a couple of months when we go out there. I know you'll be up.
We'll be there.
We look forward to it.
All right.
Okay? Take care.
Give
The
Rita a
best,
hug.
Joe. Thanks very much.
All right.
Great.
Take care. Give Karen a hug for us, too.
Will do. Thank you.
So that's great. He's got to tell his wife now, next time I play golf, just wound me. Don't kill him, because don't kill the pigeons, just wound them. I like that one. I'll steal that one.
Bobby Riggs told me it's not how you play the game that counts, it's how you negotiate the handicap.
That's it.
For people who don't know who Bobby Riggs is, Google him. You don't know who Bobby Riggs is? Oh my Lord. Derek. Billy, who's Bobby Riggs?
He played the big match, the challenge match that he could beat the number one tennis player in the world, women's tennis player.
Female.
Tennis player. And he gambled wrong.
The greatest hustler of our time.
Yes. And he that was a hell of a hustle too. He lost, but he made a lot of money on that hustle.
Yes, because he beat Margaret Court first.
Yeah.
And then he had to play Billie Jean King, who was number 2. Yeah. Billie Jean King wasn't hearing anything of her losing to Bobby Riggs.
No.
Bobby Riggs intimidated Margaret Court into losing. Billie Jean King couldn't be intimidated. But I see Derek's yawning now, so it's probably
It's too much coffee.
It's probably time to say goodnight.
Just don't drink the coffee. Snort the beans.
Is that how we do
it? Key. No calories.
All right,
my brother.
see you next week.
See you next week, Derek. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Derek.
Thanks for looking in, folks. Hope you enjoyed the show.
Next week's guest, America's Mexican, star of NBC's Lopez versus Lopez, George Lopez.
We'll see you next week.